Hello and welcome to Nanapod, a podcast dedicated to the fantastic manga written by A. Yazawa. I'm Crystal, and I'm joined by my best girl Kirsten as we dissect this manga, discussing everything from the emotions, the cultural impact, as well as any headcanons that might be floating around in our brains. With this podcast, we hope to preserve a shoujo staple that sadly hasn't been talked about in a very long time. So come with us. We're waiting for you in apartment 707. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nanapod. So we are picking up here in chapter 68. And we have the narration that says, I was much more worried about what was going to happen to our tour than what was going to happen to Shin. That's from Nana. And now we have, it looks like potentially like an airport. It says Shin Osaka. And the date is February 2nd at 11:53. And someone's looking through their inbox. And it's like Clara, Shin, Masato. And they go down to Shin, and it says hello. And this was back on the 1st. And it says, sorry for the late reply. I'm on my way to Yokohama Arena to rehearse for our concert tomorrow. I overslept and am really late. Right now, my assistant Shun is bitching and moaning at me. It makes sense that you want to tell Nana everything because you care about your best friend Masato. I don't think you're being selfish. Yeah. And, so this is Chikani, because here comes one of the groupie girls and she's saying her name. And then the rest of this text says, it's not better to not tell Nana the truth. That's just what the people who worry about Nana more than Masato think. I think you should protect what you think is important to you. I also think that only Nana can help Masato out. But I don't know if Nana has the capacity to save someone else. I mean, that's fair. And I'm also not entirely sure which Masato he's discussing right now. But now, this groupie girl is taking out some mascara, and it looks like she's helping it apply it to Chikani's face. And she's saying, I'm really glad you decided to go. I know it's hard to have fun thinking about Masato. But Shin invited you. If you didn't go, you'd regret it for the rest of your life. It's like, all right, now you look hot. Shin'll take you home for sure. Heart. And then she pats her on the shoulder and says, good luck. And she's got her all dolled up in this little Lolita outfit. And it says, try to find some time during the after party when you can be alone with Nana and decide what to tell her. And then the groupie's like, oh, it's Shion. Says, see you tomorrow. We all have to hang in there. And there's like a chugga chugga sound of that. And it says, newsflash, Blackstone's questioned by police. And then the groupie comes back in and she's like, Chikani. And then we're back with our main group. And Hachi's saying, pot? And Miyu says, the police came to that woman Ryoko's room while he was there. They were caught red-handed. There's no way he can talk himself out of this. And Hachi looks really worried. And Takumi says, but why'd the police raid the place then? And Miyu says, I don't know. Maybe someone tipped them off. And he says, what's going to happen to their tour? And Hachi says, what's going to happen to Shin? And then Takumi says, Shin's a minor. It's his first offense, so his punishment won't be bad. I mean, he would know. He was a juvenile delinquent. And he says he'll be all right. And Miyu says, but he won't get released for a while. And even if he does, damage control won't be easy. And Takumi says, don't be so harsh. What a downer. That's Yasu's lady for ya. Not even a downer, it's just the truth. And she says they're still trying to figure out what to do about the tour. But having Blast go through with it would be hard. You have to worry about the public image. And Takumi says, it's over. I feel like throwing up. And Hachi says, I'll go to the police. And Takumi's like, to do what? And she says, to see Shin, of course. He must be feeling so alone right now. And Miyu says, they won't let you, Nana. And, Takumi has a hold of her arm to stop her. And she says, only the agency's lawyer is allowed to see him. And her eyes get real big, and she's like, why? And now Takumi is patting her on the head and says, that's the law. And Miyu says his father might be able to see him, but he's overseas on business and just told the lawyer to take care of everything. How screwed up is that? And Hachi is starting to cry, and she says, let me see him. I'm Shin's mommy. And Takumi says, that only works when you're playing house. In the real world, honey. And now it's just, she's crying for real, and he's patting her and sits her down next to him to put his arm around her. And she's like, Takumi says, but if they cancel the tour, the loss will be huge. The fans won't like it. It makes me sick to my stomach. Miyu says, I know. But whether they do the tour or not, someone's going to bitch. The president said to go on with it and ignore the press. Takumi says, that's what Chikai would say, but who's going to play bass? And Miyu says, he said to find a fill-in. And Hachi says, what? No way! And now we are all the way back with Blackstones. And Nana saying, how long's their meeting going to last? We have to find a bassist quick, or else we can't play the show. And Nobu says, but we don't know if they'll even let us play the show. They're discussing that too. And Nana is yelling now and says, of course we're playing it. So why can't I be in the meeting? I can see why they keep you out, but... And then Yuri says, 'cause they know you just go in there yelling. They couldn't have a rational discussion. And she looks over at her with an angry tick. And she says, don't worry. The prez said to go ahead with it. You'll end up doing it, even if you don't want to. And Nobu says, I don't really feel like doing it now. And she was applying fingernail polish, and Yuri says, oops, I messed up my nails. And then Nobu says, we're at our best like this, the four of us together. What's the point if one of us isn't here? And now, like, for some reason, they're all, like, in their little high school uniforms. And Nano's saying, you're talking like a dork in some cheesy teen drama. Don't make me barf. And Yuri just starts laughing, and he says, you really think we could play with just any bassist? And she says, it's just bass. If they can play bass, they can play. Nobu does not look happy, and he says, but you know the fans won't buy it, and I wouldn't either. And Yuri hugs him and says, why don't you ask Ren to play, heart? And then she kind of kisses his cheek, and his eyes get kind of big, and he's like, what the hell are you saying? We can't do that. And she says, why not? And she's like, Ren wouldn't have a problem with it, right? And Nana's kind of got big eyes. And Nobu says, no way. Ren quit on us way back when. We can't ask him to do something when he's in Trap Nest. And she says, but if Ren appeared as a surprise guest, it'd be great. And the fans would be so psyched. It'd be all the buzz. I bet the old guys at Gaia would say yes to that. And Nana's eyes are still huge. And Nobu says, you can't do something just for the hype. But Nana pulls out her phone with a beep, And Nobu looks over there, and she's on the phone with Ren, and she's like, "Hi, Ren, I got a favor to ask you." And then Nobu stands up and he's like, "Nana, where's your pride?" And she said, "I tossed that out a long time ago." And Ren's on the other side, like pulling the phone away from his head because they are shouting. He's got a question mark, like, what is the hell is going on? And then she's thinking, whatever it takes. And he's like, "What is it? I heard about Shin." And Rira's here in the room with him because she's crying. And she's thinking, "I just want to make it in this biz." Nana's thinking that. Says, "No, Naoki saw it on the news." She's thinking, "I'll do anything." And now the sweet old fox guy is like, "I'm sorry, but let's cancel the whole tour." And everyone is like, "Yeah." And is like, "We're really sorry about what happened." And back in the other room, Nana's like, "Please, Ren, even just for tonight would help." And he's like, "I'm sorry, I just can't do it." And she's like, "Why not?" And he says, "If they're done with Shin because of something this small, what would they do to me?" And Rira kind of sits up. And she's like, "What did you do?" And he looks over at Rira. And he's like, "I'm just kidding." And then Rira smacks him really, really hard. And he's like, At any rate, all requests go through my agent." And she says, "God damn it, we don't have time for that. Don't mess with me. I'm being serious." And he says, "Well, I seriously don't think it's a good idea. Shouldn't you play your cards right and lay low for a while?" "Why do I have to lay low," she says, "when some idiot made this mess?" And he says, "Some idiot? Shin's your bandmate." And she says, "Why should an idiot like that be in our band?" And there's a pause. And Ren says, "When things are going good, he's your bro. But when it's not so good, he's out." And Nana kind of pauses. And he says, "Why would I want to play with someone like that?" And then he hangs up on her. Which, yeah, it makes sense that he would feel that way, because it is really messed up that Nana is not thinking about Shin and what could happen to him. But at the same time, Ren, like, you kind of made this mess in the first place by abandoning her. So, like, it's kind of a both and, but he's also setting firm boundaries. It's such a mess. And then Yuri's like, "Didn't work out?" And Nobu says, "I knew it wouldn't." And then there's a ring of, it's like Nobu's phone. And he picks up and he's like, "Hello, Yasu? The meeting's over? So it's canceled?" And Nana has gotten up. And he's like, "Oh, well, I understand. Is there any way we can see Shin?" And she has left the room. She's completely disassociating right now. Probably feels like being left all over again. This is why I said in a previous episode that it would probably be better for these kiddos at this point if they just broke up and be amicable, but they're young. And now everyone's in the bus, and Genpai's like, "This is so depressing, sigh. How should I tell the president so he agrees with the decision? Oh, man." And the Foxman says, "I'm leaving it up to you, Koano. The president has no choice. Shin's a minor. We should apologize for our part in it, too." And Genpai says, "Yeah, we overlooked his smoking and boozing. We coddled him too much." And Fo Masato says, "But canceling the whole tour is too harsh. Shin will feel so guilty and suffer for that." And Yasu says, "That's exactly what he should do. This really is all his fault." And everyone is like, because because Yasu is never really harsh like that. And Genpai says, but the president might make Shin spend his whole life paying for the loss. What should we do? And Fomisato says, I won't let that happen. And Yasu says the president should do that, actually. Then Shin might get it together and make an honest living. And everyone is now back to again. Yasu's just dropping bombs here. Masato says, let's find another bassist. And at least start from the Osaka show. This is too heavy a burden for Shin. And Yasu says, it's all right. And she says, why? And he says, to feel responsible is to understand your own existence. And everyone pauses, and Genpai says, but Yasu, can I butt in here? If his existence caused all this, he'll just blame himself. And Yasu says, but it's much better than making him think that he's expendable. And they pause. And the Fox manager man says, you're putting the band on hold till Shin comes back. And Yasu says, yes, I'm sorry. And then he says, you made your major label debut differently than you wanted to. It's not a bad idea to start the game over again. Let's do our best, step by step. And Masato is crying, but she looks grateful. And now we're back at Weekly Search editorial department, and the big mosquito man is like, that punk really blew it. And the schmoozy sleazy guy is like, that girl who looks like Rira is the one who got arrested with him. He did something crazy, just like we thought he would. And the mosquito says, he blew it, and now the band itself is at risk. When I made them debut with such a bang. You're weird, dude. He's like, I'll write a follow-up article. And the other guy says, there's no way you can clean up this mess. And the mosquito says, I'll write about Shin's crappy upbringing in a dramatic way and make the public feel sorry for him. And the other guy says, you always do the same thing. By the way, did you track down Nana's mother? He says, nope. She might be dead now. And the other guy's like, And the mosquito's like, I thought she was tougher than that. I'm disappointed. And the other guy says, well, be nice so she doesn't haunt you. And now we're in Nana's head. And she says, when I got in the dorm elevator, I started having breathing problems again. When I reached the 5th floor, I realized that I couldn't live here anymore. Why would I want to play with someone like that? Rethinking Ren's words. She's thinking, where can I go? I can't go back to Ren's place. What do I do now? She's just like her mother. Running away. Says everything's coming to a grinding halt. And there's a drip of a drop. Says, oh, it's raining. And Hachi says, oh, really? I didn't notice. And Miyu says, it was sunny when I came over. And Hachi says, do you want to borrow an umbrella? Or should I call you a cab? And she says, And then Hachi says, or I could call Yasu. And we see Yasu in the back with a little Superman cape, like he's flying over. And Miyu says, I'm glad you're feeling good enough to be funny. And then Hachi says, I can't just keep crying. I have to pull myself together. As his mommy. And she says, Nana, you're so tough. I'm jealous. And then Hachi gets big eyes and says, no, I'm not. I'm really weak and naive. And Miyu's got all the dots. And then Hachi says, I'm just trying to be strong, like Nana. Maybe it's working, heart. And then Miyu says, well, Nana. And then Hachi says, I'm worried about her. She was so psyched to go on this tour. She must be in shock. And Miyu's got to look like probably worse than that, but she doesn't say anything and is like, then do you want to come with me? And Hachi says, where? And Miyu says, Yasu will come home at some point too, so you should come cheer them up. I'll go get rid of Nobu and Yuri. And then Hachi says, how did you know about me and Nobu? Yasu, you blabbermouth. And Miyu's like, are you coming or not? And she's like, yeah, I'm coming. And they all get into Takumi's car, and it goes vroom. And he's like, so why do I have to drive you guys over there? And Hachi says, why should we waste money on a cab? Can you pick me up too? Perfect. Yes. This is great. Inconvenience him. I love it. And Miyu says, hey, Mr. Driver. And he says, what is it, miss? And she says, do you know a girl named Shion? And then, like, Takumi has just, like, lightning strikes in the back of his head. And he's just like, and then Hachi's like, what? Who's Shion? And then Miyu's like, oh, I get it. And he's like, what do you mean? I don't know her. And it's obvious that he does. And Hachi grabs a hold of his throat and says, who is she? You sleazebag. And he's like, hey, I'm driving. And now Miyu's got kind of a worried face. Because, again, her relationship with Yasu is still new. And she doesn't know still what to think about his relationship with Nana. And I think that it's okay. It's okay for her to feel this way. And there's a ding of the elevator at number 5, and Yasu walks in to see Nana sitting at the end of the hall. And he says, Nana, what are you doing here? And she grabs onto him, and she's crying. And then he sits there for a second, but then he pushes her away. And he says, let's go. And she's like, go where? And he says, the president wants to talk to you. And then he just walks away from her because he has to set the boundaries. And she told him to. So, you know. And now we're here at the Shikai Corporation. And the creepy, sleazy manager says, Nana, I want you to go solo. And her eyes get big. And he says, we'll put Blast on hold for a while, just to tide things over for now. You still want to go sing, don't you? And she's got the dots, and she looks over at Yasu like, what do I do? And he says, don't worry about me and Nobu. Just think about yourself right now. And then she's thinking, well, I wasn't worrying about you guys. I want to sing, but on my own? And then Fo Masato says, Nana, you don't have to answer right now. And then she leaves the room with a slam of the door. And then the president says, of course, Nana, there's no need to rush anything. Think it over tonight. And she's thinking, tonight? That's rushing things to me. And it is. And now we have the think boxes that say, hey, Hachi, to be honest, I was like a little kid, always crying and scared. I'm so glad we met. I wish I could have told you that. It's weird when she says things like that because it's like she's dead. You know, it's like she's dead. Maybe she's dead. She could be dead. We don't know. So, anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this one. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel. And stay tuned. I have a little bit of a channel announcement this month. So be back, and so you can listen to what's going on with that. I'm not going to give anything away right now, just because I'm trying to keep everything concise. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Good night.